Nice to have you here, Martin, Cheryl, Tim, Alex, and Tony, and hopefully some more. I'm just waiting finally closes. Yeah, Andy and Rich. Good. Thanks for joining us. So as is becoming customary now, just while the numbers level out, I'm just going to pick on anyone who's been clever enough to turn their camera on. So Martin, since you're first in the list, thanks for joining. Anything in particular that brought you here today? Was it just generally you had a slot, or was there something specific about this topic that brought you along?
I've been meaning to go to one of these sessions for a while, so I guess just getting more insight into how AI is being used in different settings, in this case in sort of production, financial services service settings. So again, I think every time I talk to somebody that says so few people are actually doing this, and so getting a bit of an insight as to how that's taking place and what can learn from others is what I'm looking to get out of today.
Amazing, good stuff. Thanks, Martin. Andy, not seen you for a little time. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, so long. I couldn't remember how to get off mute on a Zoom call. Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, so no, it's similar really. Not been to one for a long time, Barry, so thought it was about time I showed my face again. But really interested around the scaling of AI. We're doing loads of in AI, but it all kind of seems to stop as we get kind of anywhere close to a production environment. Very risk averse about doing that. So interested again just to hear what other people are doing and how they're progressing up that kind of track.
Great stuff. Thanks, Andy. And Ben Hall, welcome back. Another week.
Yeah, no, anything last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything from yourself? Anything you'd build on what Andy and Martin said about today?
No, I really enjoyed the session last week, and yeah, it's really interesting hearing. I think the whole fintech space is actually really broad, and there's a lot going on, and so I'm just here to broaden my knowledge, really.
Fantastic. Well, you're in for a treat today. So we sat in a room for a little bit on Friday and just had a bit of a chat, and it's a real fascinating story. And in case we've got here with Armenak. So if there is anyone here that doesn't know me, just to say a few words, my name is Barry Cranford. I run a number of tech communities in London and virtual. One of those is the London CTOs, and I know I've got a few members from that here today. Just over a year ago, we started a lunch club for CTOs. And the idea was to bring people together around a particular topic where everyone was interested in the same thing, just as a way of setting up some new relationships, some new conversations, and yes, sort of really trying to kick some things off. It went really well. We started with about 5, and I've got 40, 50 people coming along every Friday. We're speaking to Sam, been working with Turntabl for a good few years now. And we're speaking to Sam about it, and he was saying, "Oh, it's a shame we haven't got something specifically in the financial services or the fintech space." So we set something up, and that's what this has become, the FS Tech Coffee Club. And we moved on to scaling stories, so finding interesting founders and co-founders who are from various parts of the fintech ecosystem, financial services ecosystem, and using their story as a way to exactly what you said there, Ben, sort of really broaden people's knowledge and go into detail about specific areas. So I'll hand over now to Sam, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks very much indeed. And thanks for your help getting this thing set up. It feels like it's been a good few months now. We've got a great crowd today, a great co-host in John, and a great guest as we could tell from our prep call. These things have, for me, really opened my eyes to all of the work that's going on in the fintech space. To Ben's point, right? There's an incredible amount of work that's happening. Anybody that thinks that it's like it's kind of solid now is fooling themselves. There's so much innovation and so much good use of technology, and for me and my professional background, I started out as an engineer in financial services. John and I were colleagues way back in the day, and now I run Turntabl, which is a software development agency. And we work with clients from all over the place, but we do focus on financial services. And I think one of the reasons is it's just so interesting. It's so fascinating. And so for me, this is a gift from Barry that I get to come and speak with these fascinating people and spend time with our guests and you folks here in the audience. So thanks to Barry for helping set these sessions up, and Thanks to folks who keep on turning up. I will stop now and introduce my co-host, John Freedman, and our guest for today's session, Armenak, who is going to tell us about his work at Reflexivity, previously known as Toggle.ai, and how that spun out of an R&D project in a financial services company. So anybody that's worked in financial services will know that there's actually a whole bunch of potential future work in the R&D space, right? You know, there's like a lot of folks spend a lot of their time figuring out the art of the possible and what, you know, what next year's technology plan could look like. And this is, what we've got for you today is a really interesting story about a successful case, a successful application of that work. So, Armenak, you came to Toggle AI, you built out Toggle AI, spun from an institutional R&D project, right? So
Correct.
You already had IP and a client and funding already in place. So firstly, introduce yourself, please, and then tell us about Reflexivity, but by way of how did that happen? How did the conversation happen, and what made people comfortable letting that go?
Definitely. First of all, thank you, Barry. Thank you, Sam, for the kind words, and John for co-hosting this. You guys did really mount the pressure on on me, but thank you. It started off Reflexivity. It spun out of Lombard Odier, which is a hedge fund, you know, across 2 continents, and it spun out from an initial, you know, internal need of having to go through a lot of fundamental data and analyze that data, backtest the data, and just quickly glimpse at what the market is doing on a daily basis. Something that, you know, anyone who's dealt with time series and you know is dealing with macro traders knows that the amount of data is just humongous. And even if you're looking at it from a day-to-day basis, there's no amount of hours throughout the day to go through it all. And it spun out maybe by pure luck, maybe not, but we were very fortunate when, you know, Stanley Druckenmiller saw it and said, okay, this looks like it could be a product on its own. And for Lombard, it meant that, you know, they could have this offloaded to an external party with external funding and just be clients of this and, you know, just use it and reap from the benefits. We started off, you know, with funding, with clients and the mission and the product as well. So we had something. Obviously, it was, you know, stitched together because it wasn't a scalable product that could be deployed with various different clients. But I think, you know, it's very rare. I've co-founded other startups before, and you know, the kickstart we had, we were just very, very fortunate. So we bought out the IP, and today Lombard is a client of ours. So that is, I'd say, it's not your typical garage setup. You know, it was almost born in production already.
So when that happens, you start with a product, but you also start with a big cost base. And a lot of employees are probably quite like working at hedge funds and now at a fintech. Can you talk through a little bit about the shift from an internal service provider to, I guess, an external product company and what that meant?
I mean, so I came from the startup background, and you know, the other 2 co-founders came from the hedge fund space, and I think we all understood that there needed to be a shift in the way you think about the product and the way you build the product, because you're now building for, you know, your typical client, and instead of, you know, your typical internal client who's usually much more lenient, and you could, you know, be testing out things. And now that you're charging for it, you have a slightly different threshold that you might put. We did start up with a big cost basis, and unfortunately, that cost basis has not shrunk at all, because Reflexivity provides you not just with the tools, but the underlying data as well, which anyone in investment knows how much, how expensive these things are. And, you know, the data providers themselves, they know as well. So they start you off with, you know, a small contract. And as you start gaining visibility every year, they come with,
keeps getting up.
We need to increase the,
Yeah.
the contract price. So yeah, it was, you know, you couldn't really apply a lot of the lean kind of like startup lessons that come out of YC, or bootstrapping a lot of it, because a lot of what we do is very rooted, and, you know, let's say we always focus on, you know, the auditability and explainability of some of the insights we generate. So it can't be, oh, just trust me on this. It's because I'm telling you so. So it really needs to be, why is this insight generated? What's the backtesting? Where's the evidence? You know, what's the excerpt? What's the original document that comes into that? So a lot of the insights, as well as the conversational, you know, you can ask Reflexivity to run an analysis. It will tell you what is the underlying data it used, how it used it, how it transformed it, and give you the plan, as well as kind of like how it was executed. So traceability is key, and, you know, where the data is coming from is also very, very key for us.
I think it would be really cool if we can get into a bit of a discussion about what your product is and what the architecture looks like and the data sources and how you aggregate it. But I've got one more question about, you know, given that this is scaling stories, right, how you got from 0 to 1. It sounds like, you know, just tell us the story. How did it happen? It sounds to me like an investor came to you and said, hey, this thing that you think is a little internal doohickey is actually something that we should turn into a product. That's a bit of a gift, right?
It was a gift. It was a gift. So that took us from 0 to 1, which is also quite a challenge when you're doing a startup. We went from 0 to 1 to 100, if you want, during COVID. So we started off as, you know, we spun out of a hedge fund. Our typical customer is a hedge fund. We will build a product for hedge funds. What came from COVID is a rise in retail investment. So we quickly shifted and adapted for that. So suddenly you had to do, you know, self-onboarding, accept a credit card, integrate Stripe and the like. So we implemented that relatively easily because we had, you know, from day one, very pluggable architecture. So I don't know how many of you know the hexagonal architecture, but it really helped us a lot throughout, and I can talk about this later on. But it really helped us, you know, take a lot of elements, repackage them into a retail offering, and we scaled to, I think, over 100,000 users very, very quickly. However, the market turned, and for retail investors, that meant, well, get rid of whatever is no longer helping you. So when the market was bullish, customers were bullish, and that basically introduced us to Interactive Brokers. Interactive Brokers is today one of our biggest partners and customer. They, you know, we recently in the past 18 months have switched back to serving B2B. However, the consumer side of things is still accessible exclusively for Interactive Brokers customers. So you can go into Interactive Brokers within, you know, the equivalent of their app store, and just we're the top, you know, the top used or subscribed to research application within Interactive Brokers. So that started the journey with Interactive Brokers that grew over time, and helped us not just, you know, have a major customer and distribution funnel, but also helped us, you know, build and shape our product as well. But yeah, so sorry, a lot of different topics to cover, but yeah, back to the second part of your question on, you know, data architecture. So today, our data providers are big names such as, LSEG, S&P. They provide us, Dow Jones, for instance, as well. They provide us with structured as well as unstructured data sets to help us generate insights. So we thrive around earnings season because that's when the most interesting unstructured data comes from between filings, the transcripts of the interviews, the news around all the earnings, pre-earnings and post-earnings, and all the analyst ratings shifts. And that is when our system is like fireworks, just overworking in order to try and understand how the market is looking, and provide a summary to our customers about, okay, what is it they need to focus on, rather than we say cut through the noise. So basically, you have a mountain of data and you just need insights. You just need to know what you need to know and know it, basically.
It's fascinating, the concept for the product and how you manage to serve retail and institutional investors. And some of the concepts that you're talking about, citation, summarization, this is where AI is kind of settling on at the moment, but it's in a real product that's been around for a while. And we also touched on the knowledge graph. So for anyone who doesn't understand or isn't familiar with what that means, it's taking different pieces of data and putting explicit relationships between them that aren't necessarily obvious. So that feels like a major differentiator. And how did that evolve in your product?
Yeah, great question, John. So the knowledge graph is, built from the insights, but it closes the loop by generating insights as well. So it's an ever evolving kind of, knowledge graph. I don't know how else to explain it. Of relationships, themes, drivers, market reactions that basically make what our product or the insights from our product different from anyone wanting to take the same data sets that we have access to and generate the same insights. So think of it as the context that feeds into. I'm sure everyone uses ChatGPT one way or another these days, and the more context you give it, the better the response it is. The more you tell it, hey, no, this is about this, and use this document to analyze this and that. So we use our knowledge graph as a context to any of the insights we generate. Let's say Apple, within their filings, they have spent, I don't know, 5 million on healthcare. That on its own is an information, but it's not necessarily an insight. And then you're like, okay, let me see how much Apple spent last quarter on healthcare, and let's say it was 2.5, so it doubled. That you're adding one more contextual thing, and then you're like, okay, what about Apple's competitors? Someone like Samsung. How much did they increase their spend on healthcare? And suddenly you go from just an absolute number of 5 million on healthcare to a narrative on the investment, and are they in line with the market? Are they more aggressive than the rest of their competitors? Are they underperforming compared to that context in itself? And AI and large language models help a lot in streamlining a lot of this. So when the first GPT model went out, we were very happy, and we knew exactly what to do with it. So we have been fortunate in acquiring a lot of experts from Kensho, which was an acquisition by S&P. And a lot of these people have worked on language models, not large back then, but on language models. And we were kind of waiting for a large language model to come around, and we knew exactly, you know, the use cases and how to do it. And when I saw, you know, some of, you know, my friends who are, you know, building other startups, they were like, oh, yeah, there are these language models. What do I do with them? How do I use them? And so compared to them, we knew exactly, and we were almost waiting for this technology to be available. And that kind of, you know, emphasizes on what happens today. So today we work very, very closely with the three major providers, you know, OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic, three of which we have, you know, a very deep partnership with, and as well as, you know, one of them is our client at the same time as we're their clients. And this partnership helps us always, you know, get a preview on what's upcoming before it's generally available. We have a lot of use cases that we kind of share with our partners so that it helps shape their roadmap as well. And, you know, whenever they're able to solve one of our, you know, challenges, they come to us and say, hey, can you test this out? And, you know, we have a mutual agreement on what is, you know, a test phase and when, you know, we align on when things can go to production. Because today, one of the major challenges that, you know, we had initially and we kind of continue having is partly a scale problem, provisioning enough GPUs, serving enough, you know, clients, and make sure, you know, that capacity planning is happening with the service providers and the language providers. So yeah, I don't know how many of you heavily use Anthropic models, but if you go and use Claude via Anthropic directly, you're rate limited very, very quickly. So yeah, it's always a conversation trying to, you know, plan ahead and plan the use of which model and the capacity they can give you. And, you know, it's always, they want to give you less, we want more, but that's the usual conversation.
It's nice to speak to an AI focused firm that was waiting for large language models rather than came into existence after them.
It's interesting though, because a lot of us are used to hearing about AI, like to John's point, AI companies that have been created because they've seen large language models exist. They might have some niche knowledge about a problem space, and their next company is to use a large language model to solve some niche problem in the problem space that they know, right? Fine, it's a solid business, right? But can you talk a little bit about the knowledge graph and the areas that you use large language models in, and how you use your data sources, like how you analyze them, how you get data into the knowledge graph, how real time is it, you know, what do you do with fast versus slow data, and then specifically where you're using large language models for like communicating with clients or to do data analysis before you poke the data into the graph.
So the answer is yes. We use language models almost everywhere now. So from the moment that, you know, data enters, you know, our data cluster, to the moment it's analyzed, to the moment it's classified, it's cleaned, you know, labeled, to the moment where a customer is asking to analyze something. So it's really everywhere, and it's not just the large language models. We do train, maintain, and deploy some of our in-house, you know, small models, humble models, and they work in conjunction with various different tasks. And, you know, the key is not having, you know, it's not just prompt engineering. It's not just, oh, here's a problem, please solve it, or here's the data, fix it, or check if it's okay. It's really breaking down a task like, you know, any engineer would, and be like, okay, first I need to get the data, store the data, but also, you know, the health check. The health check is not just about, we do pay a lot for the data, but, mistakes happen a lot, especially with, transcripts, with structured data sets, unfortunately, but these things do happen. The important part is identifying the issue and feeding back to either the data provider or, asking for clarification if it's a customer query. So
would an example of that be conflicting data in two news stories about the same event? Like what would that look like? So
two news stories about the same event is not necessarily a wrong data set. We do have a lot of those. So we don't have just Dow Jones as a news provider. We have 3 different news providers, and for us, it's a measure of how amplified is that news. So everything can be turned into a data point and an additional label in the graph that is going to help you identify whether this is small story, big story, little impact, major impact, or even things like, okay, who released it first can tell you a narrative around a news item. So we clean it up, we label it, we store it, and we index it a lot. Today, our biggest challenge, I think, is on the vector databases, because you have an ever-growing amount of data sets that you're storing, and the challenge is always to understand, okay, when do you decay certain data? When do you decide on phasing out some of it? If not, give a lower priority for some other data sets. And we're working with a new partner now on the vector database side to see if we can replace our existing database provider. But that's a separate story. But I think it's very important to go back to the initial question: is where do you use large language models or just language models? And we try to use them everywhere. So so that on the insight generation. So you have your usual summarize, give me the most interesting highlights from a document, but then you have the process of, okay, we take these and then we start actually generating the insights. Okay, what is the story here? What is the data telling us? How do we put unstructured data and compare it to structured? Going back to the earnings example where we thrive is literally you have all sorts of data coming in at the same time, and then we had to build our own internal workflow engine, which is very similar to an Airflow or an N8N, but we had to create some places where you have to pause the workflow because you're waiting for the earnings release. Yeah, you got all the news on the pre-release, and you generated your insights from there, and now your workflow is paused waiting for the actual release, the numbers, and then you add some metrics to it. Okay, what was the earnings surprise? And then you continue, and then you pause. Was there presentation attached to it? Was there a news conference? What's the transcript saying? And then after that, you take the news after all this happened, and then you create a whole story around the earnings release. So it's these things we had to build because unfortunately there was no clear way for us to manipulate a lot of the existing workflow orchestration tools out there. So we quickly spun out something that is useful for our use case, and all of that we call kind of like unprompted, if you want, insights. And then you have on the flip side of it is whatever users specifically are analyzing. Yeah, a good question was around when Trump wanted to replace the sugar in the Coca-Cola. So we asked our AI, like, okay, and it broke it down. It broke it down into, okay, what realistically that meant for production, and could there be anything we could really build from this? Is this something feasible? And it went through some of the commodities data. It went through the news, and it dug up some of the production numbers as well, and gave you a whole analysis about, okay, in theory this is fantastic, but in practice this is not really feasible with
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You touched on it really briefly, and I just want to ask a real quick question about your, specifically your data architecture. You mentioned two things. One is about decaying information, kind of calcifying it, like presumably, and then the other was about the kind of creation of these workflows, like two sides of the same coin, right? And the creation phase is up to the minute, happening according to the news, pretty real time, human scale. And then the decay is, at some point you have to decide that the news story is set in stone, history has happened, not much more is going to happen to it. And then in between, you've got this like scaling of data, which is a news item is going to generate not just many facts, but also many more linkages, presumably between facts. How do you manage scale at the data level?
Well, very good question, Sam. And this is where we're battling it out with our vector database, and we try and so there's a limitation as to how much you can scale each data set, even with a lot of the performance tweaks on the database side. However, a bit more technical, we use Golang on everything that is, every single microservice that we have in production is written in Golang, and Golang leverages concurrency, with unparalleled, I think, concurrency, because it's built into the language, and that allows us to have several different databases that you can query concurrently, and then very quickly decide on service side of things, okay, what is relevant, what is to be used, what is not to be used, and things like that. So we try to balance it out between the database itself and tweak that, and then the rest is all on the service side. So you can split out to multiple clusters. Usually it's, so if you want an example, for instance, all the filings are not in a single database. It's really by filing type, because there's a lot of information depending on what is the filing. If it's 10K or a 10Q, it's not a matter of just taking the document and just throwing it in a vector database and then lighting up candles and hoping for the best. The chunking methodology, and it's really very refined by document type, and a lot of documents are indexed in various different ways and in various different databases based on what is the current query, what do we need, what we need to surface, and what are we looking for. And all of this and every single query or data set that comes in directly affects the knowledge graph. So the knowledge graph, you can think about it, it's evolving in near real time. We do a lot of human in the loop QAing to ensure there's nothing wacky in there, but it is the living thing that evolves on its own based on not just data that comes in, but again, what is being queried, what are we missing? Maybe a user is asking about a data set that we currently don't have, so we have the capability to say, okay, let's go to our data provider in real time and then see if we can shortcut all of the flows, and then this feeds back to, okay, what's our strategy? Do we expand the data sets we have at hand versus go to the data provider in real time.
It's really fascinating.
Thank you.
I've got a question specifically about developer tooling. Maybe we can also weave in testing, because this sounds like an organism rather than a deterministic system. Trying to manage that must be a real challenge. But when we were prepping, you talked about several months of investment in developer tooling, and that giving you quick time to market for building new features, deliver for customers. That's something I always encourage for an internal service team, but maybe unusual in a product company, especially getting started. So how's that investment at the start paid off?
So it's, when you're starting something, you're definitely not worried about developer experience or dev tooling. But it comes out from a need. And it's a lot of late nights, a lot of weekends to get this done, because all the engineers understand that once we have better dev tools, we have better developer experience, everyone's life is much easier. And unfortunately, we didn't have Cursor back then. So we had to write a lot on our own, and it's a balance. We always prioritize the product needs, and then once we did, so we've built an internal tool that allows us to create and deploy microservice in minutes, and we focus only on what it needs to do. It's a CLI tool that asks you a few questions. Is this listening to the Kafka topic? Does this need a Postgre database? Maybe it needs a different vector database, maybe a NoSQL database, and it gives you everything you need, and you just focus on building the core of it. It took us several months to build, but once we had it, we were on overdrive in delivering new features. We're a team of relatively small number of engineers, so the whole company is barely 50. We have just over 30 engineers, and we maintain 400 plus. I mean, today with Vibe engineering or Vibe coding, it's the number continues to increase, but we have a lot of services that we maintain. And if not for the automation and the developer experience, all these services would have been a bottleneck to progress, rather than just something that is helping us do things better. But yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah. If I go back to the testing side of things, is traditional integration testing saying when user does this, I want that to happen, even possible?
Well, it is, and I think traditional testing only takes you so far. Today we rely a lot on synthetic testing, which is running every few minutes on production. So we have, we do have the traditional unit test, we do have the traditional integration test, but I think the real test is the synthetics that we have, which is hitting real API endpoints, spinning up real screens, and then just clicking on the scenarios. The biggest problem for a company like ours that is very data driven is that all of your traditional automated tests kind of fail to catch the outliers of the data, for which the impacts are really, really big. And because also of the multitude of data providers, the data providers not necessarily in sync. So to give you an example, so we have a data provider that tells us, okay, what are the, to stay also on earnings, what's the earnings calendar look like, and then come that day we go out to Edgar, which is the official repository for all filings that companies should file the documents with, the US publicly traded companies should file with, and Edgar doesn't necessarily have the data yet. So it's also an issue of timing. When does the data provider have the data? And then you're constantly battling, what we call internally the kind of like the hurricane data, which is like, on the one hand, you're expecting a document to be there, but it's not there. Is it an issue with your service that is pulling the data? Is it an issue because it wasn't indexed, so it's not being surfaced? Or is it simply that the data provider does not have the data either yet or at all sometimes? So again, all the data providers, we treat them as partners because we really need them on board on our feedback, and very, very often we preemptively tell them they have a problem which they don't know about yet, and it's fine. It's fine. We're heavy consumers of this, so we always kind of have processes in place to get back to them, and a lot of the data providers do appreciate this. And am I still coming through?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Talk about the video.
Oh, I'm back. Sorry, the video was frozen for a second. And yeah, a lot of the data providers do appreciate this, and have internal processes to basically deal with us, but in a positive way, because we're bettering their data as well. Unfortunately, we don't get discounts for those.
You used the word partnership, and we talked about interactive brokers before. There's this fascinating story which maybe you can tell again about Thomas Petterfy and getting in touch with your company and who he is. It's really interesting to talk a little bit about that and what sounds like a great opportunity and has played out that way for you guys.
Yeah,
taking that retail customer base and ending up with an exclusive deal with a partner.
Correct. So Thomas Petterfy is founder and chairman of Interactive Brokers. Is still more or less still in touch with what's happening with Interactive Brokers, but back then we were a very small player with Interactive Brokers, and we had I think just an insights partnership, so we delivered insights to their users back then. And then the funny story is we on our contact us page, someone, well, Thomas Petterfy wrote in and he said, I need Jan to call me, and we were very suspicious of this, so we through our contacts at Interactive Brokers, we validated that this was a real message from actually Thomas Petterfy, and that's started strengthening our relationship with them, and expanded from just being a data provider or an insights provider to a more deeper partnership where Interactive Brokers are investors of Reflexivity, as well as customers, and the partnership kind of took off with a lot of also how we evolved the knowledge graph, and various different use cases that we have. And I think it is, again, we've been very, very lucky to have such partners that help us build and grow Reflexivity. So yeah, it's like for about 2 hours we were looking at we have a Slack notification whenever someone fills in something on our contact us, and we were all looking. It's like, this can't be real.
Contact us. We didn't mean that. Not like that. there's like upsides and downsides to for a startup, fintech startup, to pursue a single channel or even a single, major customer, right? And you mentioned a couple of them in terms of product depth. How the relationship with Interactive Brokers has shaped your knowledge graph and has shaped perhaps your feature list. But there's also customer risk, right? So how do you go about assessing that? How do you go about making the decision to narrow down on one customer?
Sorry, to what?
To focus on one customer and one channel.
I mean, it's fairly simple. Like, who's willing to pay us now for what they want? It drives a lot of some of the people who are wishing for things, but they're like, oh, I'll maybe sign up if you guys do this and that, versus here's some money, build this. I think that is the obvious way of shifting from priorities to one customer versus the other. But also I think there's whenever one or multiple customers are asking for the same thing, and then it is already on a roadmap, it kind of bubbles up the feature. But when those conversations often happen with the same customer on and on again, then the partnership is built naturally. There's we didn't go into it as, oh, let's become partners and build together, and you guys invest in us, and then we'll deploy a lot of the tooling, and it just naturally happened. Like things, you ask about the consumer base, so it was very natural. We wanted to focus just on going back to our roots, focusing just on the B2B aspect, and we had everything already deployed and running and working within Interactive Brokers, so it was a natural way to say, okay, now it's everything consumer based is exclusive for Interactive Brokers, and it's a fire and forget. It's working. We don't need to do anything there, and we can continue offering that while focusing solely on our B2B customers. So it really just naturally happened, and we weren't trying to force it. So again, I appreciate it's not your typical story, and we do appreciate that we've been very fortunate, but again, we just we did it in the most natural way, I would say.
Certainly, like the discussions that we have, like to go a little meta, in like the discussions that we have in these scaling stories, there's a lot of survivorship bias because we speak to the people that have succeeded and have built fascinating businesses and are doing like cool shit, right? And it's like yours is one of those. But to have an investor come along and say, hey, this idea that you guys are building internally, we should productize it, and then to have this huge organization in your target space come along and say, we want you to work with us and we want a big slice of your attention is really kind of phenomenal, right? You've really been very lucky.
It's like finding product market fit without looking for it, almost. When the market came to you and told you you'd got it.
Product market fit found you.
There's that.
Not to minimize the work that you've done.
No, I'm not saying that, but all I'm saying is that when often a lot of startups I see, and it's I'd say they're building something without listening to customers. Starting off with an internal product, there's already a problem you're solving, so you are kind of the customer, and then an external person coming in and recognizing, oh, I have that problem as well, and I need this product, is additional validation. So I understand that it's the untraditional way, whereas a lot of times I see founders focus so much on a solution that they forget the problem that they're trying to solve, and most importantly, they forget to listen to the customer's problem. And it's like it's totally fine to lose sight of things because you're head down building. But when your customer tells you, hey, you're not solving my problem, or I have a slightly different problem, and we're diverging away, it's very difficult for us to, not be stubborn on our convictions and be maybe a bit open-minded and just listen to what customers have to say and just address it.
Probably the biggest challenge that technical founders face, right? We love the thing that we've built. It's our baby.
Yeah.
We're very myopic and quite focused on the thing. I want to open up the questions to folks in the room. If you have questions for Armenak, any of the things that we've spoken about have piqued your interest, you want to dive in a little more, we've got another 10 minutes to speak. Whilst we're doing that, John and I have got some thoughts and questions about your positioning and the future. One of them is the space that you're in, although your technology is cutting edge, it can be seen as quite conservative, right? And if you're talking about how does business and financial news get to informed consumers, there's an obvious element in the room, which is Bloomberg, right? So how do you as a as a newcomer in the market start to chip away at those legacy incumbents, those behemoths?
So I think, well, we have, I would say, two different levels of customers. There's the really big ones, the really big banks, wealth managers, and the humble-sized customer. The humble-sized customer understand that they need to have an advantage over their competitors, and when you look at a solution like ours that has everything, which means that you can be done with some of the contracts you have, then you just okay, understand that this is a competitive advantage that you need to have, and that conversation is easier than the bigger customers. The bigger customers, I think, I don't blame the engineering teams, is the decision to build versus buy. And quite often we get, where everyone's like, yeah, we kind of understand it. And then you have the internal engineering team that is usually, few hundred people who are all very motivated to work on cutting edge technology and be like, we can do this. And what happens there is they come back months later and they're like, well, we did something. It really looks like a POC we did 3 years ago. Can you show us again what you've done? And having all that time pass where they try to build and then they come back and see how quickly we've evolved versus what they've seen 6 months ago, just kind of like shifts the conversation of maybe we can build, but we can never catch up. So it becomes an easier conversation. With a lot of them as well, we do slices. So we build everything in microservice architecture, and some do have internal tools, and they just cherry pick whatever they want to integrate into their tools, because they understand that they cannot build everything. Question from Ben. So yeah, our main, I would say, our biggest core is the knowledge graph that is evolving every day. So it doesn't matter what ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini put out there. It's good, and we do use a lot of the new capabilities they build. But as beating heart of what we do, it's still the knowledge graph that is ever evolving.
Cool. So we've got time for a quick final point, and then back to Barry to wrap up. We talked about just then a retail product, like Perplexity for finance, Claude Finance, these large language model providers are looking at the space, but there is a barrier to entry for institutional clients. Equally, touched on it earlier, there's lots and lots of AI startups marketing into finance that came into existence when large language models appeared. How do you see the market of data, software, insight providers into financial services? Is it interoperability, small platforms, big platforms, a bit of everything?
So I would say interoperability is a recurring topic. So there's a standard called FDC3, which is interoperability via iframes, and this is something we provide to very large institutions because they all have their dashboards. They don't want to have yet another tool to log into. So they already have their windows. We want to provide, as I was saying, some customers cherry pick what they want to receive, and one of the ways to receive is either via API or FDC3's compliant iframe, which sits perfectly well with the rest of the tooling they already have, and it's very well defined. And I think as long as you can take what you've done, put it on top of their proprietary data, and bring in the context of your knowledge graph, then I think you have a win-win situation where they don't necessarily want to give you their data, and we don't want it, because then it becomes a big headache for the compliance team, and we're here to provide solutions, not create additional problems. So interoperability, dedicated deployment on-prem, even for some customers. We remain very flexible because, as you said, it's a very traditionalist space for some of the really big banks.
Awesome. And nice to hear a FinOps project getting a shout out without any prompting. Well, Armenak, thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to Sam and I. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who's joined. Barry, we'll let you close.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam, and thanks everyone.
Yeah, just echoing what John said there. Yeah, thanks, Armenak, for sharing. Fascinating story. Really interesting to even more so than Friday to get the extra details and digging a bit deeper. I have put a link on the chat. If you open the chat and quickly press the link, if you fancy it. Like the whole point of our original CTO job clubs and these events, there's only so much you can go into in 1 hour. The idea is to bring people together who are interested in a similar space. So I'd invite you to open that, add your LinkedIn, and connect with anyone else. It's a way of sort of bringing people together that are interested in this, really to kick off those relationships. I'm sure I'll speak for Armenak here and say he'd be happy to be approached with any questions that weren't covered, or perhaps that you didn't feel comfortable. Brilliant, thank you. If you wanted to keep that, just directly, then you can obviously do that. And we do a lot of work with. So we have a CTO job club as well. We've got about 240 people in there, all of those that have joined in the last 18 months. And we have found that most people that arrive, we then say the first thing you should do is reconnect with your network to try and see who in your network may be able to connect you. And so few people have spent time building networks while they're in work and then wait until they're out of work, redundant or whatever, or looking, especially if you're thinking about stepping into the fractional space. I'd encourage you to connect with everyone on the call, drop them a quick note, and if you've got time for coffee, all that sort of thing. So that's really what we're trying to achieve with that document. But again, thank you so much, Armenak, for being here. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sam.
Barry, for having. Thanks, everyone.
Of course. And we'll see you all next time.
Barry, next week we've got Rob Porter from Flexon.
We do indeed, and the link is on the bottom of the document there, so you can sign up to then get. We're on Luma now. This is the first time and it works, so we'll be on Luma now moving forward. So you can sign up there and hear about all future events. Guys, thanks so much.
Fantastic.
See
Thanks,
you all
Barry.
again
Thanks,
soon.
John.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.